Well, since everyone really seemed to love it the last time I covered the history of a channel, I guess it would be fitting to do another one. The year is 1986. Our story starts with a fella by the name of Ted Turner. In 1986, he got the rights to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, only to sell it back after just 75 days. But he did keep some archived cartoons. There were some catches with both of these examples, however. Turner pretty much snatched Popeye from Paramount, and he was only allowed to purchase Looney Tunes cartoons if they were older than 1950. 5 years later, Turner bought Hanna-Barbera, granting him an even larger pile of animation. Since Ted Turner already had a knack in creating some TV networks, and he was now sitting on a giant pile of cartoons. I bet you can guess where this is going. So, Turner decided to create a new channel, one that would play cartoons 24/7, 365. Since before, trying to watch cartoons was difficult since they usually only ever came on Saturday mornings. This meant Turner's TV channel, consisting solely of cartoons he bought, was a revolutionary idea. But a revolutionary idea always needs a revolutionary name. Some names that were considered included Animation Central, Turner Kids, and Cartoon City. But the one that got picked in the end was the Cartoon Network. Except the made it not clean, so maybe just Cartoon Network. Cartoon Network officially debuted on October 1st, 1992, and they actually had the guts to have Bugs Bunny shoot someone be the very first thing they ever aired. Also in 92, Betty Cohen became Cartoon Network's first president. Throughout 1992, Cartoon Network exclusively played the dozens of cartoons Ted Turner bought. That may sound a little repetitive, but luckily Hanna-Barbera had produced over 150 shows before Cartoon Network even launched. So the channel had a wide schedule already. At least Cartoon Network was managing to give Nickelodeon a run for its money. But after a while, playing the same cartoons started to get stale. So in 1993, Cartoon Network produced their first and probably most obscure original show, The Moxie Show. This show also goes by the names The Moxie Pirate Show and The Moxie and Flea Show. But because of how scarce it is, a lot of episodes are straight up lost. On top of that, The Moxie Show wasn't even fully produced by Cartoon Network. But this second show is. On April 15th, 1994, Cartoon Network's second original series, Space Ghost Coast to Coast, premiered. This was a talk show featuring Space Ghost, a character Hanna-Barbera created in the 60s. So now that Cartoon Network had 2 new original shows under its belt, you may think that it was content with its schedule, right? Well, you'd be wrong, actually. Cartoon Network didn't think it was good enough. They wanted a lot of new originals. In 1995, they did exactly that by making a new show for this purpose. That show being What a Cartoon. What a Cartoon would showcase various cartoon shorts to be turned into full shows. Eventually, some random dudes volunteered to make shorts for this show, and thanks to their efforts, the show laid a bunch of eggs that would soon hatch into new shows. And in 1996, the first of these eggs would hatch. Since Dexter's Lab was the most popular short on What a Cartoon, it got made into a show first. It also helped put Cartoon Network on the map, and is often considered to be the first official CN show. Meanwhile, Cartoon Network was given a preschool block called Big Bag. Technically speaking, Big Bag was actually a half-block, half-show made by the Children's Television Workshop. Also in 96, Turner decided to merge with Time Warner. This allowed Looney Tunes cartoons newer than 1950 to air on CN. And it also allowed shows airing on Kids WB to waltz on over to Cartoon Network and air there on occasion. Now, it's 1997, and more eggs are hatching. Wait, what the? As it turns out, that one egg had 2 shows in it. Cow and Chicken and I Am Weasel were both created by the same person and premiered the same day. I guess David wanted to pitch 2 shows via What a Cartoon. Oh, and speaking of that show, it's gone now. Meanwhile, Cartoon Network was peeping over at these weird Japanese cartoons called anime. More specifically, the action-y ones. Cartoon Network wanted to air them, and in order to do so, made a new block called Toonami. In 1998, it's 1998, and now another egg can hatch. The Powerpuff Girls ended up becoming one of the most popular shows on Cartoon Network. Even though it's about 3 girls fighting crime, even boys will like it. Now, the last egg can hatch, right? Nope, not yet! Because a new cartoon came flying in out of nowhere. Ed, Edd n Eddy is a Canadian show that surprisingly didn't have a pilot on What a Cartoon. Okay, now the last egg can hatch. Congratulations! All the eggs have hatched. And as a reward, a very unpopular show literally no one has ever acknowledged the existence of can premiere the same day as this piece of nightmare fuel. But this led to a problem. Cartoon Network had way too many shows now. So, they had to give David's shows the boot. It's now the turn of the century. Doo-doo. While Nickelodeon was off celebrating with McDonald's, Cartoon Network had some problems of its own to work out. For instance, they just got a new show about a sheep of all things, which made the channel crowded again. This prompted Cartoon Network to dump all their older shows onto a separate channel, and that channel would be left completely untouched for the next decade and a half. Meanwhile, the newer shows, or cartoons as they were called, began to dominate CN. We now enter 2001. President Betty Cohen packs up her bags and skedaddles. And now CN's new president is Jim Samples. Jim Samples thinks adult shows would be perfect to show at night, and thus Adult Swim is born. And Space Ghost Coast to Coast immediately decides to go live there. Meanwhile, 3 new shows are coming to CN. Another show no one talks about, Dexter's Lab's New Baby Brother, and this thing that's basically 2 shows in one. We now enter 2002. In 2002, 2 new shows premiered. Never mind, a new show premiered. But more importantly, it was CN's 10th birthday! Da-da-da-da-da! To celebrate, they made a movie based on the Powerpuff Girls. This would be the only animated Cartoon Network movie for more than a decade. In 2003, Cartoon Network did something quite interesting. They chopped Grim and Evil in half, causing it to become 2 separate shows. While Billy and Mandy would go on to be a staple to 2000 CN, Evil Con Carne would be cancelled after a year. However, after 7 long years on the channel, it was time for Dexter's Lab to step down and air its last ever episode. Elsewhere, Cartoon Network met up with DC in a shady alley. DC gave Cartoon Network a new superhero show that would go on to be a hit. Oh, and also, Ted Turner retired. Knock knock, get the door. It's 2004, and it brought CN some new shows. It was also time for Cartoon Network to give its logo a makeover. Along with the new logo came new bumpers featuring various CN characters hanging out in a city together. Meanwhile, Toonami was getting a little too wild. So as punishment, CN exiled it to the weekends, and another tamer block came in to replace Toonami called Magoozy. CN also decided to have its own little summer vacation. But hey, at least it got 2 new shows out of it. On August 22nd, 2005, Cartoon Network decided to give this preschool block thing another go. Enter Tickle You. However, Tickle You only aired for 2 hours every weekday, so not worth it. And rightfully so, since it flopped after only 5 months. In October 2005, a new show called Sunday Pants premiered. It was just perfect to cancel not even 30 days later. On December 27th, 2005, a new show debuted, Ben 10. Initially, it was just another face in the crowd, but it would later get some special treatment from CN. Oh, speaking of which, let's go see what they're up to. So, it turns out, the crossover city was too expensive. CN replaced it with a random character saying his catchphrase in front of a red background. It was cheaper, yes, but a lot of fans didn't like this change. Cartoon Network also decided to make another movie. which they then turned into a show. But the fans were appalled at the sight of this. What the heck is a live-action show doing on a channel called Cartoon Network? And that's not even the worst thing to happen in 2007, because Boston just exploded, and one of Adult Swim's shows was to blame for this. This forced Jim Samples to resign from being Cartoon Network's president, thus making Stuart Snyder CN's third president. With Snyder in charge, the Yes bumpers got thrown into some emo kid's lunchbox. But on September 14th, 2007, the lunchbox quickly got replaced with a band called The Hives. And I gotta say, these recent shows have been pretty underwhelming. If only... The world was blessed with the arrival of Chowder in 2007. There's actually a certain someone who has this as their favorite CN show. But in exchange, CN spent the next couple years erasing a lot of its content. However, Ben 10 couldn't go just yet. CN made another season called Ben 10 Alien Force. Ladies and gentlemen, I now present the 2008 roster. This is only the beginning of Stuart's renovations to Cartoon Network. The bumpers started featuring these little CGI dudes called nudes. Latin America had their own version. The network had begun airing cartoons from Canada and the UK. Part of this was because Kids WB aired some of these shows, but it was sadly shut down. And they started airing a collection of shorts called Wedgies. Wedgies was basically a smaller scale version of What a Cartoon. But Flapjack was the only full show to hatch out of Wedgies. And a new movie block came around called Flicks. Over on Adult Swim, Space Ghost finally ended after 14 years. Meanwhile, Cartoon Network was busy scheming. They remembered a certain show they used to have, and decided to ignore their own name for a second as they made a whole block of live-action shows. CN Real aired a whole horde of live-action programming on a channel that literally has cartoon right there in its name. With that being so, a lot of people were mad about this. People consider this Cartoon Network's dark age because of the live-action content. In fact, in 2009, Cartoon Network debuted 5 new live-action shows, and absolutely 0 animated ones. Also, Ed, Edd n Eddy decided to have a big picture show and then dipped after a decade of airing. Now, all of the cartoons have officially ended. So did the 2000s decade for that matter, since it was time for the 2010s. And in 2010, everything changed. The logo changed again. Along with the new logo came new branding. CN found a random show wandering around aimlessly after Nickelodeon rejected it, so it decided to take it in. But a lot of other shows popped up in 2010 as well, along with another season of Ben 10. Now, with a new mindset, Cartoon Network decided to live up to its name once more. And also get rid of some of their cartoons that hung around for too long. And also cancel a show they just got 3 months ago. Meanwhile, Adult Swim decided to start airing an hour earlier. Turns out, Cartoon Network was not exactly doing so hot around this time, because the new shows that were premiering were awful and everyone hated them. Not all of them, though, since one particular show ended up staying and it still airs as of 2023. Cartoon Network also decided to make their own award show, but it was a blatant ripoff of Nickelodeon's Kids' Choice Awards. There's a problem right now. Bullying is at an all-time high, so Cartoon Network released a documentary and an anti-bullying campaign both called Speak Up. Suddenly, another live-action show came dancing on in, but it was clear Cartoon Network had learned their lesson. Now, Cartoon Network is 20! To celebrate, they made a block that played their classic shows. Also, Toonami is back, except it's on Adult Swim now. So is Symbionic Titan. Meanwhile, Ben 10 seemed like it was going to be cancelled finally, but nope. While Cartoon Network was having a nice warm drink of nostalgia juice, they thought it would be fun to bring back a classic show, but give it a totally different coat of paint. Let's just say nobody exactly liked that coat of paint. But wait! 2 new shows are also coming out of 2013. This one is written by people who are probably high on crack, and this one will most likely develop a toxic internet fandom. Now, it's Christmas time, and as a present, Cartoon Network added an extra hour to its airtime for Adventure Time and regular show. Also, Stuart Snyder had to pack his bags and renounce his president status due to a management shift. Here to replace him is Christina Miller. You may think CN would go back uphill again with a new president. But not really, since Miller let that dumb reboot eat the entire schedule for breakfast. Meanwhile, Adult Swim moved its time slot to 8 p.m. And CN's rights to Johnny Test expired, sending it back to where it came from. As for Ben 10, at long last, it could finally leave. It's now 2015, and Cartoon Network saw Boomerang decaying in the corner due to neglecting it for so long, so they gave it a new logo, and also replaced a lot of the old shows with ones already airing on CN. So now Boomerang's new purpose was to air shows Cartoon Network didn't want anymore. Also, Flicks went defunct. On the bright side, at least the programming lineup is better than it was in 2011. No! Not you! In 2016, Cartoon Network wanted a new look. They spent the last 6 years simply upgrading the style they were using. So in May 2016, they introduced a new look called Dimensional. And it looks nearly identical to Check It 4.0. But nonetheless, Cartoon Network was letting that nostalgia juice get to its head. So they made more reboots of some of their classic shows. But of course, people were not too fond of Powerpuff Girls 16. People were even comparing it to another reboot. Meanwhile, AT&T marched in and bought Time Warner for $80 billion. This caused Cartoon Network, and everything else Warner Media owned, to become AT&T material. Now Cartoon Network's boat was really starting to sink, since a lot of decent shows were leaving, including Tom and Jerry and Looney Tunes, even though they were there from day one. And also that bad show took up about 3/4 of CN's schedule. Adult Swim continued the trend of stealing things from CN. This time they snatched Samurai Jack so they can make another season. CN seemed to be completely done with anime by this point, since the last anime left, Pokemon the series XY, moved to Disney XD. 2018 saw the premieres of a lot of new shows, but Adventure Time ended after 8 years. And oh my gosh, the bad show got a movie. Meanwhile, Cartoon Network changed their styling. They called it Mashup. Oh, and look, new shows. These shows are nice and all, but some people just want the stuff that was there before. But then they all went and ended. But first, Steven Universe got a movie and a quick spin-off to wrap up everything, and then... And now, it's 2020. Christina Miller took off and was replaced with Tom Aschheim. There's a worldwide pandemic, and everyone is sad. Not only that, but a lot of shows are starting to disappear from CN. Some shows that were gonna air on CN ended up going to HBO Max instead. Then suddenly Tom Aschheim had an idea. He decided that Cartoon Network was gonna have a preschool block once again. This new block would be called Cartoonito. Cartoonito already existed in the UK since 2006, but this is its first time in the States. But this led to a problem. Because now, Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, and Cartoonito were sharing one channel slot. So, as time went on, Cartoonito got less and less hours of airtime, going from 8 hours a day to only 4. And look, CN changed its look yet again! And decided to air movies again via Acme Night. It's basically a Flicks replacement. Then one fine day, in May of 2022, Warner Media decided to merge with Discovery. This ended up creating Warner Brothers Discovery. What could possibly go wrong? Turns out, Warner Bros. Discovery decided to remove over 35 shows from HBO Max. And among them were some of Cartoon Network's shows, most notably Infinity Train. And all that trauma just in time for Cartoon Network's 30th birthday. On the bright side, at least we got some sweet complete series DVDs. And we now enter 2023. Cartoon Network's lineup may be pretty small right now, and the studio seems to be shutting down, but we can only hope for a bright future comes around someday. Anyways, I hope I mentioned almost everything. I'm just gonna go now. Bye!